Hi, everybody. I'm answering questions on Cyberlaw in my book. These are from a course that I designed and built, but I'm not teaching it this year. And these questions are mostly on data law. Got an introduction, data breach notification, cybersecurity laws. Another type of data law is privacy laws. So this is what we're covering, those chapters. And remember, for all of you, laws all around us, it's for everyone. It can't just be for lawyers, lawyers being the only ones that know what law is and why, because we're in a nation of laws. And technology's all around us too, so technology's got to be for everyone. So that means cyber law is for everyone. Disclaimers, this is quick and off the cuff. It's not a polished slide deck or video. And when I build a course, when I teach a course, usually there's weekly assignments, and I invite a question at the end of each assignment, and that prompts a lot of these questions too. So if you remember the book, it's got a bunch of parts. First three parts kind of lay a foundation, then we get into all these different areas of cyber law, and here we're focusing on data law. All these areas are really cool. Cyber conflict, that's coming up. Pretty important when we're seeing armed conflict around the world, because to talk about cyber conflict, you need to know the laws about armed conflict. Don't forget the chapter resource pages. I'm going to talk about these more, but I got chapter resource pages on every chapter just about, including these ones we're covering here. Here's the disclaimers. I might make mistakes about the law, and I can't be an expert in every area of law we cover in this book. And I might make mistakes about the facts too. And I'll give you some opinion too, because why not? All right, first question. I was wondering how frequently these laws get revised, considering how fast technology evolves. Since new issues keep appearing, I'm curious how the legal system adapts and stays up to date. So this is kind of a recurring type of question we kind of get every week, and that's why when I wrote this book, I answered this question up front, and we got another question similar this week. One thing I find interesting in this course is how quickly laws related to technology and cybersecurity have evolved in recent years. My question is, do you think the current legal system can keep up with the pace of technological change, or will there always be a gap between new technology and the laws that regulate it? So folks, just consider how and why legal disputes happen. And we have legal disputes in all areas of life, including cyber. But in a car crash, which have been happening for over 100 years, we have a litigation, and there are legal disputes about what the facts were, but also about what the law says about that incident. So we've got to remember, it's built into our legal system that it needs to evolve for each new case, set of facts, and new circumstances. So in chapter 2, and I like the way I numbered my subsections, 2.6, and the subs, you know what chapter you're in. I don't even have to give you a page number. So we talk about that, and a lot of people do say, oh, the law's behind, it's too slow, it needs to catch up. But we got to put that in perspective. We got to realize no matter where the law is or wants to be, it never makes 100% of people happy. And we probably don't want the law to move really fast. Number one, it's not going to please everybody. And number two, sometimes we need that time delay. We need that messy, lengthy, complicated process. To pass a law through the legislature, to pass a regulation, it's supposed to be a long process. And people argue about it, and usually each side's a little bit unhappy with the result. A court decision, an opinion by a judge or a bunch of judges, justices on an appellate court, that's a long process. Does the law need to catch up? I guess it depends on your perspective. If you're not happy with how the law is now, you want it to quote unquote catch up and change to make you happy. If you're happy with the law, you think it's good. It's addressing things. So in these chapters, we're talking cybersecurity and privacy. Who's happy with the laws? I guess it depends. But if you're a tech company, You want less regulation. You want to be able to do what you want with people's information because that's how you make your money. But if you're a consumer or consumer privacy-focused organizations, you probably think, hey, we need stricter privacy laws to protect people. So I think this all depends on perspective, right? Another question, given that cybersecurity frameworks like NIST CSF, National Institute of Standards and Technology Cybersecurity Framework, are voluntary but legislators clearly drew on them when drafting mandatory laws, at what point does widespread industry adoption of a framework create a de facto legal standard of care even without explicit statutory adoption? This question sounds like it was written by a lawyer, right? A very well-crafted question. So another recurring theme throughout the book is that the law is always supposed to be reasonable, and it's supposed to look to what's reasonable. And we talk about that a lot in the negligence chapter, but all throughout, all a law is supposed to be reasonable. And if a law is in place, it creates legal standards. We looked at negligence and how negligence law requires people and organizations to do what is reasonable. Now, these cybersecurity frameworks, they are not laws, right? So they're not required. They're voluntary, but they're best practices, right? They're put out by people who know a lot about cybersecurity, and the framework is saying, hey, this is how you're supposed to manage and organize your cybersecurity. It's a best practice. So yes, that's going to influence what is considered reasonable, and the law is supposed to be to consider that too. So if you have a dispute in an area of cybersecurity, and it may be at issue whether what that organization did for cybersecurity was reasonable or not. So yeah, you would look at what they're doing, and you'd look at, hey, does it comply with the cybersecurity framework? Because that's a best practice. And I like to compare things with driving. What are best practices for driving? I guess first we look at what are the laws for driving, the traffic laws, and then you look at best practices. And you might use that to try to determine if a person was being reasonable or negligent when they were driving and whether that caused an accident. Now, I'll also note a lot of companies may say they're following cybersecurity frameworks. That doesn't mean they're really following it. That doesn't mean they're following it well. And when you look at the cybersecurity frameworks, those have a lot of judgment calls and reasonableness built into them. The frameworks don't say you must do XYZ with minutia detail about what that entails. The organization still, even if they're following a cybersecurity framework, has a lot of decisions to make. And again, they'd have to justify whether those decisions are reasonable or not. Okay, next question. What do you suggest as a professional, I guess me as a professional, that us as students do for a job in this field? And I guess the field, a lot of these students are going into cybersecurity, information technology, information systems. And I guess my main answer is you want to focus, especially as a student, but as you're done being a formal student, we want to transition to being lifelong students, and you want to focus on the things that are important in any field. I guess you want to focus your learning, your knowledge, building of knowledge on cyber and technology, but also on law. And obviously I'm biased towards law because I'm a lawyer, but everyone needs to know some law, and on management, because a lot of people, they want to move up the ladder a little, become managers, not just being told what to do by someone else, but become a manager. And for that, you need to know some law, you need to know some management. So it comes down to building your skills. That includes your skills on research and investigating. I'll come back to that in a sec. But you need to know how to read. You need to build and practice those reading skills, because if you know how to read well, you can learn anything. If you don't know how to read well or let those skills fade, you're limiting yourself. You need to know how to think, how to write, how to edit your own writing, and how to present and speak. You're building your knowledge. You also have to network. You have to meet people, because you don't get a job just by submitting a resume to some random place. You really get a job because you know someone working there. And to network, part of networking and learning about jobs, you need to know how to investigate or research, because you've got to research companies and jobs that are out there. And that's why I talk about these things in the book. You'll find that in part 1. Certifications can help too, because in the tech field, a lot of people hiring sometimes look to certifications to show that minimum level of knowledge. So I have a video, Tips for a Career in Cyber. If you've been watching these videos throughout this year, you've seen me mention this before, and maybe you've seen it. I'll put that link in the description. Comment: one thing found useful in the week's material was seeing data law as a progression from secure disposal to privacy. That framework made the subject easier to understand because it showed how simpler duties connect to the broader legal issues organizations face today. Also helped me think more clearly about how cybersecurity and legal responsibility overlap in practice. Thanks for that. Yeah, I got a video on data law. I show it here chronologically, simple to more complex, privacy most complex. And then I show it another way in the video and in the book, where how they overlap, because privacy really encompasses all of those other areas too. So I show that diagram a slightly different way too. Thanks for that comment. Okay, next question this week. A success was being able to connect John Bandler's protect, notify, comply principle to both state and federal laws, which helped me see the practical application of the material. All right, so first I looked at this. I was like, oh, great. You're thinking of this. And I have a video. I'll put the link in the description, why your organization needs this cybersecurity. And my 3 goals of cybersecurity represented by these 3 bubbles. But they're actually not protect, notify, comply. So I'm not sure where you got the notify from. Because my 3 goals are protect, comply, and mission. 3 motivations to try to get people to do cybersecurity. 3 goals: protect from cybercrime, comply with legal requirements, and mission and efficiency. So I'd be very curious where this notify came from. And I always, very interesting. So the comply is really what we're talking about, where we talk about the laws for cybersecurity. An organization should comply with them, and that's one important reason to do cybersecurity. But another is to protect from cybercrime, and another is because you can actually accomplish the mission, do your job more efficiently. So let your instructor know where you got that notify from. Question: a setback was that some statutes and regulatory details, like the exact citations for New York Shield Act and New York Department of Financial Services Part 500, required extra research to confirm, which took more time than I initially expected. If you read the book, and I really encourage you to use the book as your first resource to find these things, and the resources I provide for you. I tried to make it so students can find these citations, get to the actual law easily. One thing, and I know citations can be intimidating for some, but don't let it be intimidating. Look to that book as your first step to get you to those next steps. So you could go to the index and look on Shield Act, and it'll tell you what pages. You could go to the table of contents, and you see each of these chapters. There's not too many pages in them. And if you go in those chapters, you'll find cites to it. So let me make that. All right, bring that to the front. So let's say you're here in 30.3, looking at one part of the Shield Act. We're zooming in. Here, I'll tell you where it's found, New York State General Business Law. And then you go to that footnote down here. It's got where to find it with the link. And I know if you have a paperback book, and I think paperback is the best way that you can focus on the reading, I know you can't click on that link in the paperback book, and that's why I'm going to show you my chapter resource page. You go to that chapter references at the end of the chapter. It will tell you this QR code and this URL to my resource page, and it gives you that information. There's the DFS Rule 500, and it gives you a start where to find it. And I give a lot of links. NewYorkStateSenate.gov for New York State laws, and law.cornell.edu for a lot of other statutes and certain regulations. Take advantage of my resource page. So here's the Chapter 31 resource page, and then when you go to my website, all of these are clickable. And to find the name and the site, the one thing you're allowed to copy is a copy to a statute name and citation. So this you can copy out so you get it, and then you can click on the link to go to the statute of regulation. So I really try to make it easy for students to get those first levels of research and learning. Question: do you think there are any sectors that currently do not have good enough laws to protect the kind of data they handle? Remember, U.S.'s sectoral model, meaning sector by sector. Also remember, laws need enforcement. They're not just magical things that 100% of society and businesses are going to comply with. So you need enforcement. I think we're seeing a lot of federal government reduced, especially compliance and enforcement. That's going to have an effect. The financial sector is obviously highly regulated, so that is probably doing pretty good. Health sector, it's got HIPAA, but we've seen the Department of Health and Human Services really shrunk and reprioritized. Probably education getting shrunk. I think they're looking to disband that. So then you look to state laws. So I think with a patchwork is never optimal. But depending on what they replace it with, the current patchwork might be better than what some would try to replace it with, right? One question I had is how organizations balance compliance with cybersecurity laws while also keeping systems user-friendly and efficient. Sometimes strict security measures can make systems harder to use, so I'm curious how companies manage that trade-off in practice. And I think the answer is many companies and organizations do it very poorly. A lot of organizations, a lot of individuals do cybersecurity very poorly. We do see examples of security measures that are implemented poorly. Sometimes that poor implementation even reduces security. Maybe it locks users out more because, there's one organization I belong to, and they don't warn you about the password, the need to change your password. They just lock you out if you don't do it, and now you're locked out of your account. So they think it's a security measure. Really, it's harming things. We see it with schools, organizations, even banks that have security measures that are implemented poorly. You're right that convenience versus security is an area of trade-off, and that's that CIA triad. You can increase the confidentiality, but you might reduce the ability to have things available. So sometimes when you increase that security, you reduce or you impair the convenience, the availability. But there's also trade-offs of cost versus security, because to do cybersecurity, it takes time of employees, or you need to hire a third party to handle it. Even when you have in-house cybersecurity folks, you need to pay for third-party solutions. So money and time, it's definitely a trade-off. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, especially if you made it to here. Either you are a glutton for punishment, or maybe you found this enjoyable. If I answered your question, let your professor know. Find another way to let your professor know you watched this. And remember, law and cyber law, it's for everyone, and I love answering genuine questions. You can learn more about cyber law, see the references in the video description, including specific resources for this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Take care. See you in the next one.